Good afternoon, everyone. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our food and beverage tune-up webinar for this afternoon. We'll go ahead and introduce ourselves first and foremost. My name's Jeremy Roth. I'm the Vice President of Professional Services for Jonas Club Software. And with me today, I've got Greg Archibald, who's one of our implementation specialists. And together, we're your hosts today for the F&B Tune-Up webinar. We're super excited to be with you here today. This is the first of a series of webinars that we're hosting over the course of the next few days on the topic of cleanup and system maintenance. So if you joined us for our session this morning, the content is going to be similar, obviously not exactly the same, because we'll obviously talk about it a little bit more from the F&B side than from the retail side. But there definitely is quite a bit of overlap in terms of today's session that we're doing right now versus the one earlier today. In terms of how you can ask your questions as we go, feel free to use the chat box. We'll try to slot in the questions as we go, and we'll also try to leave a bit of time at the end of today's presentation for any questions and answers then as well. All of the sessions for this user conference are being recorded and will be available back within the agenda, usually within a few hours. So any of the sessions we did first thing this morning are slowly becoming available to you right now. So by the end of today, we should have all the sessions back up, so you can come back in throughout the course of the next week or so and review all of that content. We will also be putting all of this up on our YouTube channel, so you can access that all there. I'll walk through where exactly that information lives in YouTube towards the tail end of this presentation. Last thing before I kick it over to Greg to get started is we'll go through the agenda in just a moment, but also there are a bunch of fantastic resources and documents that are available to you just underneath the live stream for this session as well. We've put together a great little checklist of all the different maintenance items that you should be doing within your Jonas system across the board, no matter what area of the club you work within. And what's great about that document is not only can you actually use it to literally check off the items that need to be done, but there is an extensive list of video links in there as well. So most of the topics we're covering today, as well as just in general about system maintenance and cleanup over the next few sessions, are all documented there for you with some video links that you can go back and reference as well. So agenda for today, we're going to do a deep dive into the point of sale system, club inventory, what some of the best practices are there in terms of maintaining your system, archiving data, as well as what some of the reports are that you may want to be backing up before you do any of that work. We'll switch gears a little bit, talk about banquet and catering and jam events, and then we'll touch a little bit on user admin and timekeeper. And for any of you that know me, I like to wrap up any of my sessions with some discussion around what help resources are available for you, and what is available to you kind of within a click of a button through online resources and within the product itself. So we'll kind of wrap up with that. I'm going to hand it over to Greg, and he's going to take it over from here with some interesting stuff about point of sale and club inventory.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. So just getting into the point of sale here, very generally speaking, there are 3 different ways that you can clean up your system. You can deactivate your items, you can delete your items, or you can create a new partition. So the partition option I'm going to get into a little bit later. But if you're looking to do a cleanup and you want to delete items rather than deactivating items, I'll get into the pros and cons of this very soon, but generally speaking, when you delete things out of Jonas, just like it says in the middle part of the screen here, deleting items will, Jonas will roll up all the sales information for that one item into one item per category. And that's really the only reporting you can do off of that deleted item. There's just one thing per category. So you can technically still report off of it once you delete it out of Jonas, but there's very, very limited reporting. So if you want to go down the route of deleting things out of Jonas, and that's the cleanup option you want to go, we provided you with some reports up on the screen right now that you're going to want to run before you start deleting things from Jonas. A PDF copy of this presentation is available for you if you want a list of all these reports, but these are the ones that you should be running ideally before you decide to delete things from Jonas. So let's go to the next slide here, and we'll cover some point of sale best practices. So I'm going to go into Jonas, and I'll show you the first two options here. But generally speaking, it's always a good idea to never overwrite a description for an item. Always try to create new ones. And then also use the same item as much as possible. Try not to have duplicate items within your system. So let me switch over to Jonas here, and I'll go over those two in a little bit more detail. In Jonas, if you go to point of sale, system setup, and sales items, right here, what I see a lot of people do is they'll say, you know what, this first item in my list here, chicken wings, I'm not selling that at my club anymore, but I have another appetizer that I want to put in its place. So what a lot of people do is they end up going in here, removing the description, and then typing in the description of their new appetizer that they want to offer. And they would just overwrite all those options. So this is something I see all the time, and it's something that I would highly recommend not doing. Uh, and the reason why I say not to do this is because all of the sales information and all the reporting ability behind this item is connected to the sales item number. So even though I just changed out the descriptions and I just created my new item for nachos, if I were to run a sales report, I would see all the old sales information from the previous item listed under nachos, which of course would be very misleading because I just created that item. I don't have any sales yet. So try your best to not overwrite those descriptions. Always try to create new point of sale items whenever you actually have a new item. In addition to that, I did mention try not to duplicate your items unnecessarily. And I find one very common reason why people have duplicate items within the system is because throughout the years, if multiple people are in control of the system, there's been a few food and beverage managers, or if the same item that you sell is a different price depending on where you sell it. Uh, all of these options are things that people do that eventually end up creating duplicate items, and they're all very avoidable. So in regards to that pricing option, if you do have a different price depending on where you sell this item at your club, you can build that into one specific item. You don't have to create multiple. So the fried calamari item that I have here, by default, it costs $7.50. But the way I built it is if you go into special pricing here, fried calamari is actually going to be $6.50 whenever I sell it in the Royal Oak Tavern. So the different prices, you can build that into your items. You don't have to create separate items for that. You can build it right in. Okay, and then we'll go back to our PowerPoint here for the couple extra points. So the third point there is use abbreviations and be consistent. My example up on the screen there is for my glasses of wine, the abbreviation is GLS, and that'll be the same throughout my entire database. All the glasses will start with GLS. All the bottle items will start with BTL. Okay, and that'll again be consistent throughout my entire system. And then the point right below there, learn your codes and once again, be consistent. So my example here is all the appetizers, the sales item number. It's going to start with APP, and then it's 3 numbers after that. So APP 001, 002, so on and so forth. Entrees for me are ENT, salads are SAL. For you on your system, your codes may be completely different than what I have, but as long as you know what those codes are and where things are located in the system, that's really all I would want you to know. And that just makes it much easier for avoiding a messy system and avoiding duplicate items. For me, if I wanted to find an appetizer, I know exactly where to find them, and they'll all be coded and listed all together. So try to learn your codes and be consistent with those. And then the last 3 options we're going to get to in just a little bit. But when it comes to your menus, use color to group like items together. Hide buttons that aren't being used. And then what we're going to talk about right now is the last point there, create a habit of inactivating or deactivating items. Okay, so when it comes to cleaning up your system, you can either deactivate or delete old and unused sales items. So I'm going to show you a couple different things here, everything on this slide. So I'm going to go over into Jonas, and I'll first show you a report that you can run, which is a list of all of your inactive items, which is a really good starting point. Then we'll take a look at how to deactivate items, how to delete items, if that's what you want to do. And then I'll also show you one more report that gives you a listing of all of your deactivated items and if they're on a menu still. Okay, so let's go into Jonas. And the first step of this, or the first place I would start, is under point of sale, sales and revenue reports. We have right near the bottom there, we have a list of inactive sales items. Okay, and the last session that we ran, I showed the same reports, and somebody asked what exactly this report shows. So I know Jeremy's going to get into this in a little bit more detail later, but if you're not sure exactly what this report does, you can always hit the F1 button on your keyboard, and that'll bring up a little help guide for you. And that tells you exactly what this report does. So I'm going to go ahead and run this report. And for this one, I'm going to choose my partition if you have partitions. And then choose a date range that Jonas will show you all of the items that you have not sold within that date range. So how far back you go, that's completely up to you. I'm going to go back 2 years for my report. And I'll do it right up until today's date or the end of the month. And I'll go ahead and print this report. And so this will give me a list of all the sales items that I haven't sold since that date, since 2 years ago. So right off the bat, I have a lot of items that came up for me. So I can use this report and see, I can confer with other people at my club and make sure we're not actually selling these still. But now I can use this report and either delete or deactivate all of these items, assuming that we don't need these anymore. So now that I have that report and I have a couple items that I know I want to get rid of, you have two options for how to get rid of or deactivate those items. Option number one, we're going to go into our list of sales items here. Okay, and I'll leave that visible so you can see where I am in the background. But on that list, I believe the my nachos item was one of those items that I haven't sold in 2 years. So I'm going to go ahead and deactivate this one. So within the item setup, we have a deactivate item flag. I'm going to go ahead and click that. And then if this item was on your menus, on any one of your menus, you would get a pop-up at this point telling you that this item is currently on a menu, which you'll want to jot down and take note of. But this one isn't, so I'm just going to click OK. And now you can see my nachos are no longer in my list of items. So really easy, simple way of cleaning up your list a little bit and getting rid of all those old or unused items. And the benefit of deactivating an item rather than deleting it is if you choose to bring that item back and make it available for your members again, you could always, just like it says up top, use the F10 button to search for inactive items. So I'll hit F10 on my keyboard. I'll get a list of all the deactivated items right here. And if I want, I can always unclick that flag there for deactivate, and I can bring back my nachos and I can start selling that item again. Okay. Now the downside of deactivating items is that once you deactivate it, that sales item number is still going to be in use. So if you were planning on deactivating sliders, reusing that code, you won't be able to do that if you deactivate your items. You would have to create a new item with a brand new code. Okay, deleting that item, that would completely delete it from the system, in which case you would be able to reuse that code. So if deleting is the way you want to go, you would be able to reuse those codes and basically build a whole new set of items. But again, be a little careful with that delete option because it does tend to get rid of a lot of the sales history. Okay, now if there's just a handful of items that you're looking to deactivate, then that should be pretty straightforward. You can just go into each one of those and deactivate them one at a time. But I find a lot of clubs out there want to deactivate a bunch of items all at once. So for this, we did think of you if that's the case. If you go into point of sale system administration, we have a program here called change item deactivate status. And this is where you can deactivate your items en masse. So if this is the first time you're hearing about deactivating items and your first time doing this, This is probably the program I would go to. Okay, and I'll leave that visible in the background as well. So all you're going to do in this program is you're going to say, set the deactivate status to yes. Okay, and then all you need to do is click on all the items that you want to get rid of. So you can go one by one in here. You can use the shift or control buttons on your keyboard. You can highlight a range of items, and you can bring all those over. Or if you are brand new at your club and you're looking to just do a full system cleanup, or if you haven't done this in a long time, what a lot of people like doing is they like using this field here, the date last sold before. And so this, whatever date you input in here, Jonas will show you all the items that you have not sold since that date. So what date you input in there, that's completely up to you. 2020, I know, was a bit of an off year, so you may want to go further back than that. But for demo purposes today, I'm just going to say March 15, 2020. And then all of these items I haven't sold in exactly 1 year. So now it's up to you, but you can highlight all of these items and you can deactivate all of these in one go. Okay, and then whenever you're ready, just hit the preview button and then update as long as that preview looks okay. Okay, so that's how you can start deactivating some of your items. Now, for those of you on the food and beverage team that's used the inventory module in Jonas, we have the exact same options on the inventory side. So if anybody tracks their beer, liquors, wines in inventory, you have the exact same options. So that would be under club inventory, files, and set up SKU numbers. This would be the equivalent of your list of point of sale items. So what you can do is you can go in here. Now I know these are golf items, but we'll assume these are food and beverage items for today's purposes. But you have the same things. You can go into this item or this inventory SKU, and there's a deactivate option in here as well. So you can flip that to yes. This is also saying that this item is currently on 3 of my menus, which is a big deal. I'm going to want to take those off of my menus after. It's saying, do I want to deactivate the point of sale item as well? You pretty much always say yes to that. And then now that Pro V1 item is no longer in my list. Okay, but you have the same options in here as well. You can click on the little toggle button down below, and that will give you a list of all your deactivated SKUs, in which case, if you do want to bring it back, you can always reactivate a SKU. And of course, you would always reactivate the point of sale item that's attached to it. And then now my Pro V1s are back in my list. So whether you're using the inventory module or not, you can deactivate things one by one, or you can deactivate your items en masse. We have this exact same program here in the inventory side. So that's under inventory, utilities, and then we have the change SKU inactive status. And it's exactly the same program here. So you're going to set the inactive status to yes, and then you're going to click on all the items that you want to get rid of. Okay, and you also have that date last sold before field. Feel free to use that if you'd like. And then update whenever you're ready. Okay, so that's what you can do if you want to start cleaning up your system a little bit. I guarantee that will make a big difference for you. Getting rid of all those old sales items, it will make your life a lot easier, make your list of sales items a lot smaller, I'm sure. And then just going back to the other option, if you're looking to delete items out of Jonas, if that's the route you want to go, there is also an option in here to mass delete items. So rather than going in here to deactivate your items, there's a program right here called delete sales items. So very similar function here. Unfortunately, there's no date field in this program, but you would just need to click on all the items that you want to delete out of Jonas, and that would delete them. But again, be very careful with this because there's very, very little reporting you can do once you delete something. Okay, so if deactivating is the route you want to go, there's one more report that you should probably run once you deactivate your items. And it's the report that I mentioned a while ago to show you your list of items and what menus they're on. Because if you deactivate an item, it still could technically be on your menus. So of course we want to get rid of those. So to run this report, we're going to go into point of sale, system setup, and sales items. And you may or may not have seen this before, but to run this report, before I click on any sales item or anything in this screen, I'm going to hit the F9 button on my keyboard. And you can do this throughout multiple programs in Jonas, not just sales items. But when you hit F9, this little pop-up list will come up for us. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the very first option in here, an item list showing menus. Okay, as soon as I do that and hit view, it's going to ask me, do I want to run this for only my active items, only the deactivated items, or both? So I'm going to run it for deactivated items. And then here is my list of all of my deactivated items and what menus they're on. So ideally, this list will be blank. There shouldn't be any menus listed there at all. And feel free to run this on your side right now if you'd like as well. But I just happen to have one item, a bottle of beer, that's on both of my beer menus. So for me, I'm going to want to go back into my menus and remove this item because it's deactivated. Okay. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. So that was your list of inactive sales items, how to deactivate items en masse, how to delete items en masse, in that F9 report showing your items and what menus they're on. Okay, so now that we covered how to deactivate items, let's talk about your menus. So there's lots of different options that you have in your menus and for how you want to organize it. A lot of this is personal preference, but there definitely is some things you can do right now to clean up your menus. Number one thing that everybody should be doing is grouping similar items based on the color. So you can see on the screenshot of my example here, all the bottles, cans, and draft beers, they're all the same color. Makes it very easy and friendly to the eye, especially for new staff. They're going to know exactly where everything's located. But there's also the headers up at the top of the screen. So there is a header for bottles, cans, and drafts. So I know exactly what each one of them is. The second point there, remove or hide unused buttons. So if there is any empty space on your menus, I always recommend you hide those buttons rather than just having blank buttons sitting there. And then for the rest of it, I'm going to show you in Jonas, but we're going to take a look at item lookup button options. And then we'll take a look at your tabs up at the top of the screen, as well as your top toolbar. So let's go into Jonas for this. And if you wanted to start editing your menus, making them more user-friendly, that is under point of sale, system setup, and quick setup menu design. So just to give you a good example, I'm going to go into my beer menu here. Okay, and like we saw earlier, everything is color-coded. My bottles, cans, and draft beers, all very easily laid out. But if you have any empty or unused buttons up on your screen, what I always like to do is hide that button altogether. So downing your list of functions over here, there's a lot of options to choose from. But for me, I'm just going to hit the H button on my keyboard, and that'll bring me to the hidden option. So I can click on that. I can click on the buttons that I want to get rid of or the ones that I want to hide, and that would just replace that button with a blank space. So for me, I think that looks a lot cleaner. And we'll assume I had a couple empty or unused buttons here. I can blank all those out, and that looks, to me, a lot more friendly to the eye. Okay, all personal preference, though. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. Okay, just going back into that menu. One other thing that I know a lot of people are doing these days is they are getting rid of all of these links to their other menus. Okay, and that might be surprising to a lot of you out there, getting rid of the link to my wine menu. You might be saying, don't I need that link to the wine menu? What if they actually have to order some wine? And the reason why I say you can get rid of all these buttons and all these links to your other menus is because you can use this display order menu tabs instead. So to give you a little demo on this and what this looks like, I'm going to hit the little test button down below. And this is what my menu would look like on the actual point of sale. So like I said, rather than taking up valuable space on your menus and using full buttons for these links to other menus, what I decided to do is anytime I go into my beer menu, these tabs will be available up top for me. So I have a quick link right up there for my wine menu. I can go right over there. I can go right to my liquor menu. Whatever I want, I can set those tabs up at the top of the screen, and those will be defaulted for me up there. Okay, so right now, if you're looking at your menus and you're a little bit tight for space, you can't fit much more on there, feel free to get rid of those links to other menus and use the tabs up top instead. Okay, and that was designed under the display order menu tab section. The other thing I mentioned earlier was item lookups. So if at your club, if you have a huge list of wines, I know a lot of clubs out there do, obviously there's only so many items that we can fit on this menu, especially once you start splitting buttons in half. But if you have 200 different bottles of wine, obviously we can't fit that on one menu. So a lot of clubs end up using this item lookup. And all that does, when you click on this button, it will give you a list of all of your items, very similar to this list right here. In which case you can scroll up and down if you want, or you can do an actual search and search for the bottle of wine or beer that you're looking for. Okay, so that is an option, but what a lot of people don't know about that item lookup button is you can take it a step further and you can make it category specific. So for me, rather than just doing a full item lookup, I did a draft beer specific lookup. And if we look into this button, the function of it is still the same. It's still an item lookup button. I just decided to rename it draft beer lookup. And then I specified a specific sales category right here. So now whenever I go into that draft beer lookup, it's only going to show me my draft beer and that's it. I don't have to filter through all the other items in my list. I get exactly what I'm looking for. So feel free to set a few of those up if you want to. Draft beer lookup, wine lookup, completely up to you. Okay. So going back to our PowerPoint here. The next slide I added more so as just a guide for reference here. On the left-hand side, this is exactly what we want to see. Everything's color-coded. There's labels. There's no empty or unused buttons. It's all very intuitive on the left side. In the middle of the screen, you have just a bunch of items, all the same color, a bunch of blank, unused buttons. And to be honest, that's typically what I see for most clubs out there, something in the middle. And what you definitely want to try to avoid is the option on the right-hand side, everything being a different color. There's no real rhyme or reason to those buttons. Try not to do that. Okay, and before I pass it over to Jeremy, I did want to talk a little bit about partitions and versus cleanups. Which one should you be doing? So when we talk about cleaning up your system, it's very easy to do. It's very fast to do it. And you can certainly do it on your own. You guys can start right now if you'd like. The only downside to doing a full system cleanup in Jonas is that your system isn't truly clean. And what I mean by that is when we saw earlier, when I deactivated an item, I said that you can't then reuse that sales item number. So if you were to go through your system and do a full cleanup and deactivate a whole bunch of items, you couldn't really reuse that number. So it's not truly clean per se, but it will certainly make your life a lot easier and clean up your system. Creating a new partition, on the other hand, is an option for you as well. And if you don't know what partitions are, they're essentially ways that you can separate sales areas at your club. So a very common example that a lot of people have are you would have a food and beverage partition and a golf partition. And those two things, those two departments would never talk to each other. They would never come in contact with each other. So your food and beverage team would have their own list of sales items. They would have their own menus, and same with the golf side. Okay, so what a lot of people do is if their system gets a little messier and they want to start cleaning things up, they create a brand new partition. In which case, you can certainly contact us and we can give you a hand with this, but we would build out your new partition right from scratch. So we can upload all of your sales items. We can recode out all of your sales items and at the same point in time. You can build your menus however you want them to be built. It's like a completely new system for you. So the benefits of that is, like it says in the table there, it's a truly clean system if you go with new partitions. You can design it and build it completely for your operation right now, but it does involve a little bit of time and a little bit of work. So I probably wouldn't do a new partition right in the middle of your busy season, but certainly on the shoulder seasons, you can create that new partition and put it into play whenever you're ready. Okay, and this should be done with the help of a Jonas implementation specialist as well. Okay, so I'm going to pass it off to Jeremy, and we'll go over some of the other modules.
Thanks, Greg. So lots of great questions as you were going through that. I think I've answered most of them as we went, but if there's any more, let us know. Keep dropping them in there, and we'll try to answer as we go or towards the end of this afternoon session. Let's touch on banquet and catering first. So within banquet and catering, I've already seen a couple of questions come through about banquet and catering. We do have an archiving procedure within this module. Now, many of you have been using banquet and catering for quite a few years, and depending, just like with Greg's example with point of sale, you might have had many people maintaining and managing that system or not maintaining that system throughout the years. So there are definitely some cleanup tools that are available to you. And one of the questions that came about was, how is banquet and catering impacted if I'm deactivating or deleting items out of the point of sale system? So rest assured, you cannot delete a sales item that is referenced anywhere else in the Jonas system. We've got specific measures in place to make sure that doesn't happen. As for deactivating items, yes, so we do allow you to deactivate point of sale items, but still have them be available to you within the banquet and catering system. So there are certain concessions that we've made to make that possible without having to have a user go back in and revise everything on the banquet and catering side. That said, banquet and catering is one part of the system that I've noticed typically takes a backseat in terms of archiving and maintenance, especially for non-revenue type events, such as committee meetings or any internal staff training. And there are ways to maintain that data so that you are archiving it. And as some of you might know, sometimes the reports that you're pulling out of banquet and catering take a bit too long to run. Sometimes it takes too long to even search for events in your system, simply because of the volume of bookings that you have in there. And one of the maintenance procedures that we suggest that you do is transferring your closed bookings to history. And we're going to cover off quite a few more of these features in our session a little bit later this afternoon when we look at accounting and membership, but one of these features is banquet and catering. So in processing here, you do have the option to transfer both closed and open bookings to history. So closed would imply any bookings that did go through the billing programs in banquet and catering. Open's a bit of an interesting one because depending on how your system's been set up, we actually have a way in the room status codes, and I've got one room status code here called non-revenue, to say transfer open bookings to history. So this isn't retroactive. If you've had quite a few non-revenue bookings in your system in the past and didn't have a code like this, by all means, go ahead and set this up because it'll save you a bunch of time in the future. But if you do contact our support team, we do have ways of kind of bypassing some of those controls that we have in the software to help move you folks in the right direction, at least with the initial kind of transition over. So as I mentioned, you've got the two transfer programs in here, very simple to run. They may take some time just depending on how many events need to be moved over. And all you're doing there is moving for a date range. Our best practice is that this is an annual procedure. You run this once a year, and that goes ahead and cleans up everything from the prior year. The question that I typically get with clubs that aren't as familiar with any of our archiving tools is, what do I stand to gain or lose? And that documentation that we've provided you with kind of helps outline some of that for you. But there is a separate history option here in banquet and catering. And most of our archives work in the same sort of pattern. So rather than going into your regular bookings or your live bookings, you've got your history bookings, which is basically the same screen. It just shows you everything that you've transferred to history. There are a couple of reports that are in here as well, and we also have a purge feature in here. So most clubs get a little bit unsettled when we talk about purging information or deleting information out of your system. We do have clubs that choose to do that, and we've got plenty of clubs that don't. But for a lot of our clubs, where the challenge comes in is just a very laggy system. It takes too long to run a report. The other classic example of that is on the membership side. So if any of you are, takes 20 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, sometimes 2 hours to run your aged receivables report, chances are it's because you haven't run some of these archive procedures. Now, the one with your aged receivables doesn't have much to do with banquet and catering, but it's the same kind of symptom. So running any of the bookings reports here in banquet and catering and them taking a little bit of an unreasonable amount of time is typically because you haven't run any of these archives. And Jonas has to go all the way back in all that history to find the information that it needs to find.
Sorry, Jeremy, before you move on to the next one, we got a question from Craig about partitions.
Mm-hmm.
And Craig said, is it possible to copy portions of the partition over, copy some of your sales areas over, and create other ones separately?
So you've got two options. You can either completely start from scratch, and that is we completely start a new partition code for you and then work with you folks to set up all the categories and all the parameters and then upload the rest of the information in. To date, we don't have like a pick and choose type tool where you can go in and say, I want to keep these categories or these items or these sales areas. It is something that we currently have in the development plan, though, to be out at some point this year. So it is coming, but not something that we have currently to date. But the whole reason why we encourage our clubs to work with professional services is because we've got tools on the back end to help with some of that. So you're not literally going in and keying in every new item or every new preparation screen. We've got tools where we can help export that data out and import it for you. I know that there's another question here. Where do I find the PDFs of this video? So that's just right within the agenda. So if you literally scroll down past Greg and I's picture, you should see it there. If you don't, for whatever reason, if you've been in the platform the entire day, just log out and log back again. There is another question. So is there a cost? Yes, there is a cost to having our implementation team work with you to get that partition set up. It just depends on how much work the club is kind of interested in doing on their own and how much of our time they need to help with that. It isn't a massive investment to do that, but there definitely is some professional services time required there. And Melissa, if you reach out to us, we can schedule a call with someone on the team to kind of help understand what that looks like in terms of level of effort for you folks. All right, so moving on to jam events, very similar in terms of form and functionality to banquet and catering. So just like with banquet and catering, the focus here is on making sure that processes are followed. So if you've got events, making sure that you bill them out. So even $0 events in jam events should really go through the billing stages so that you complete those events or at least mark them as completed. And really, there isn't a true archive procedure in here. What we use within here to really quantify something as being an open booking or a closed booking are what we refer to as statuses. So in your system, that might be something as simple as confirmed, tentative, completed, canceled, no-show, etc. Or they might be a little bit more detailed, just depending on your setup. But within Jonas Activity Management, you can then use those filters to call up certain bits of information. So in my system here, I've just pulled up the event list, and then I can look all the way back in history as far back as I'd like, but then I can pick specific filters to call up information. So nobody should have old events that are pre-posted, because that means that you potentially have some revenue left on the table, or at least some AR that hasn't been completely billed. But if I wanted to see all of my completed events since the 1st of January 2016, I can go ahead and pick that as one of my status filters and then pull up any of those events. So we use those filters quite extensively to make sure that you're picking the right data. But the question we always get is, what sort of archiving tools do we need to employ within JAM? And the answer to that is very simple. You don't have to do anything more than what you should be doing day to day, and that is making sure that your events are marked as completed or go through the billing process, and then you're able to kind of utilize all these filters as well as you should. Next one is user admin. So understandably, maybe not everyone on today's call is responsible for setting up users in your system, but it really just depends on kind of roles and responsibilities there at the club. We've got lots of F&B managers who do set up users in Jonas. And there's a couple of really important points here. So you can make users inactive. And from an overall kind of best practices perspective, as staff are departing the club, you really should be going ahead and setting them as inactive. And that's a simple one-click option there. If you're using Timekeeper, there's an additional flag there to go ahead and turn off or deactivate Timekeeper access as well. And it's really a simple process. And really, much of what Greg showed you with sales items really works the same way here. So within user administration, you've got the option here to go ahead and deactivate any user. And then you also have the option here to access the Timekeeper staff record if you're using our Timekeeper system and make that inactive as well. And once you've made a user inactive, it works the same way as with sales items. You've got a toggle here where you can toggle back and forth between active and inactive users. And some clubs will even do this for seasonal staff, so they'll come back in at the beginning of season and reactivate any staff that are choosing to come back for the rest of the season and kind of maintain it that way. Couple of other great features, and we've got some great videos on this one. So just youtube.com, Jonas Club Management. But we're huge fans of using group security. So rather than administering menu access user by user, you definitely have the option to do it group by group. And all group by group is a template that you then apply to additional users without then having to go in and maintain individual user accounts aside from their user ID and password. So definitely some best practices there, and definitely important both from a maintenance perspective as well as from an overall system security perspective to deactivate users as they leave the club. So I kind of touched on the Timekeeper deactivating users already. There are a couple of additional processes in there as well. So transferring your time data to history should be a payroll period by payroll period process. Even if you're not using the Jonas payroll module, it's really important to transfer that data over to history. And really from just an overall efficiency perspective, you only have a set of time records for the current active period. You don't have anything that could potentially be modified after the fact or after you've submitted hours to your payroll vendor. And very similarly to the rest of our modules, there is also a purge option in there as well. And we mentioned the purges for two reasons. One, it's important that you know that it's there. And number two, it's also important that you know that you should be checking for those types of menu options and ensuring that only certain people have access to it, because we see that a lot as well, is that certain people might have access to certain parts of the system that you may not want them necessarily to have access to. So a couple of help notes here. So I'm a huge fan of our help resources, and if any of you have ever seen me present in the past, this will probably be nothing new to you, because I talk about this, or I have been talking about this for years now. But I'm a massive fan of our help resources, and I think that they're completely underutilized. So I'll go ahead and run through them, and then we'll have a few minutes at the end, and I'll tie back around to some of the questions. So F1 help, this one's easy as pie, and for every one or two users that know this, there's always a few that don't. So I'm here in users, for example, and if there's something in here that doesn't necessarily make sense to me, if I hit F1 on my keyboard, I'm just going to drag over my web browser here. It actually pulls through help for me, step by step, item by item that I see on the screen, and what exactly each one of those different things do. And a lot of times we hyperlink additional options into here simply because there might be a bit more to this, right? So something like group security, for example, is a little bit bigger than just attaching a group security to a user's account. So we've got a hyperlink there that will walk you through some additional considerations as well. I love F1. I always start with F1. Even as someone that's used Jonas for 10 years, F1's constantly teaching me things that I didn't know necessarily about. But you can also go right into the menu tree and hit F1 as well, and that'll pull you up some additional information about what that menu option does as a whole. The other one here is is our report finder. And again, I'll walk you through this feature in Jonas because I think the world of it, because we've got so many different reports in Jonas that sometimes you know what you want, but you just don't know A, where to find the report, and B, what the report's name is. But something simple like Jonas should have covers reports. But I don't know necessarily where to find those. So if I search in the bottom left-hand corner for cover, it'll pull me up all the covers reports that I have available to me in Jonas. And I can pick any one of those. I can see a sample of what that report looks like. This sample is from our Jonas testing databases. Just keep that in mind so it isn't your own club's data when you're looking at the sample. Down below, it's going to explain to you what you're going to learn or what this report does, and also how to run the report. And how to run the report's a really good one because some of these reports, you will open up the configuration screen sometimes, and there's a lot of information there. And a lot of times, if there's a bit of complexity to what information it's looking for, it'll help explain to you what's mandatory, what's optional on the screen, because sometimes you'll get a whole bunch of different options, but you really only have to pick the first one or two to get the report out. And then if this is a report that you'd like to run, you just hit launch there in the bottom right-hand corner, and it's going to go ahead and launch that actual report configuration screen for you. So you can actually go ahead, move this over a little bit, and actually configure that report while you're following the step-by-step directions on the other part of the screen. So you can have that open and reference everything that you're looking at. I'm a huge fan of the release notes. Many of you know that we host What's New webinars. We're hosting ones within this user conference as well. All of that is published within the software as well. So every time you upgrade your Jonas system, we also upgrade your release notes. So you can actually come in here, for example, for the point of sale system and view all the new features or all the things that we've made better since the last time you've upgraded your Jonas system. So it just depends on how you learn best. If you like our webinars, keep attending the webinars. We're going to be hosting those once a quarter on all the new features. But if you're more of a kind of self-led person and you like to go in and just review on your own time, you've got the tools to do that right within the software as well. And then the toolbar. So some people think of the toolbar as a bit of a nuisance, but I think it's a very helpful tool. And not just necessarily for the news that's published there, because chances are you'll also see that in emails or in the support portal. But what you have the option of doing here is flagging options as favorites. So for example, if I find myself in one of the screens here and I'd like to flag that as a favorite, every one of our screens in the top right-hand corner has a little heart where once you've illuminated that, it populates it for you in your favorite section. So this is an absolute lifesaver if you're a relatively new user to Jonas. And I haven't forgotten about all of you highly tenured users as well. I love this feature for remembering those things that I don't really have to access day to day. So if you've been using Jonas for years, you probably don't need to favorite where to find the GL account inquiry, but you might need some of those more kind of specific ones that you're only using once in a blue moon. And I love using this feature for that. The other one I'll just briefly point out here is the search feature. So again, sometimes half the battle is finding what you need. You know it's there, you just don't know where to find it. So something like unrelated business income for all of our US clubs, 501Cs. If you type in UBI into Jonas, it'll just call up all of the different menu options in Jonas that contain UBI. And then from there, I can double click on any one of those and it'll load it up for me on the menu screen. All right, so on the JAM side, we've got fantastic help as well. So within each one of the modules, as you see on the screen, there is a little help icon. What I love about the help documentation is that it literally walks you through step by step all the different configurations within that module, and then is a full review on how to process anything. So if you're looking at dining reservations or events, it's extremely comprehensive in terms of all the setups and then all the different steps that you need to take to actually process something in that module.
Jeremy, sorry, before you move on there, just in case anybody on the line is in the same position here, Phyllis had a question about JAM, and she just asked, JAM events, is that or what's the difference between that and the banquet and catering program in Jonas?
So we've got two different modules in Jonas to handle banqueted and club hosted events. We've got Jonas Activity Management and we've got Banquet and Catering. Both work similarly, but not exactly the same. One of the biggest strengths to JAM events is that the event registration component is available for your members online. So for example, this is more for club hosted events. Let's say you've got the 4th of July cookout or Mother's Day brunch, and you're accepting registrations, you're selling tickets to those events. You can take all that information online, have members register online, and then bill it back office. But two very similar modules. One's available online from a member registration perspective, and both work relatively the same from a booking perspective for more of your kind of member hosted events. Great question. So just really briefly here on the enhancements, activity management, same thing. We post all of our enhancements within the product that are available for you to review as well. I'm a huge fan of the knowledge base. So jonassupport.com is what we call our support portal. There's a whole bunch of things you can do on there, anything from logging support calls, viewing past support calls, as well as searching through our knowledge base. So our knowledge base is extremely deep. There are lots of very specific articles on there on some very specific topics. So if you wanted to look at anything regarding, I don't know, prepaid minimum and how to adjust a prepaid minimum, or what the year-end process or cycle-end process should be for prepaid minimums, something that's a little bit less generic and a little bit more specific, the knowledge base is really great with coming up with some of those information points for you. A lot of those knowledge base articles are published by our support team as they start encountering some, weird and wonderful scenarios taking support calls from our clients. The other one is boot camps. So boot camps is a for charge service, but definitely a great one for clubs that are onboarding new staff throughout the year. And we've been running boot camps now for about 1.5 years on a wide variety of topics, and clubs really enjoy those. Greg here hosts most of those himself. I've already mentioned the videos. I've dropped a couple of links into the comments box on the videos. Go ahead, just onto youtube.com, search for Jonas Club Management, and you'll find an extensive library of recordings. All of our system maintenance discussions and videos are on there, as well as a wide variety. So there were a couple of questions came up today, and I've just dropped in videos on those as well in this discussion, just because we've got quite a few of those common processes documented already for you. The other great one is our LinkedIn group. It's experiencing a bit of a revival. It went quiet for a little bit, but the question that we always get on the implementation side is, what do you see other clubs doing? And being part of the implementation team now for 10 years, I can tell you that we've seen and heard a lot in our experiences, and we're always happy to share that with other clubs. But you don't necessarily always have direct dial to myself or to Greg to ask your questions. And the LinkedIn group is a great community where you can ask other Jonas users how they tend to tackle software considerations, or how they handle certain things within their Jonas system. And it's a great way to get some questions asked and answered as well. Just to touch really briefly on Clubhouse Online, very similar level of documentation within there as well. So for email marketing, websites, and the mobile app, we've got kind of 3 core ways to educate and document those modules for our clients, and that is by way of knowledge-based articles as well as videos, and we also run webinars in those platforms as well. And last but not least, our support team is always available, and many of you know and love our support team and know a lot of them by at least by their voices in calling in and speaking with them. But as you can tell, there's also lots of other resources that are available to take advantage of as well. I'll open up the floor. Greg and I will open up the floor for any questions. There is one that got dropped in here from Denise. So if you wish to deactivate staff, is it necessary to deactivate them in Timekeeper also? Yes, it is. And the user deactivation will prompt you to deactivate the Timekeeper staff as well. So you can't deactivate the user without deactivating the Timekeeper staff. That has to happen first. While we wait for anyone to type in any questions, if there are any, just a couple of reminders. So there are lots of documents associated with this presentation that you can kind of take back to your clubs. and review. The checklist is a great one. We've had lots of great feedback from clubs on just providing a consolidated resource. We've kind of thrown out quite a few different maintenance processes, and you may want to take that back to your club and review that and decide who's going to do what and when. It's a really great option that's available to you. So I'd highly encourage you to utilize that. There was a question that came through about where do you find the report finder. There's two places, very common in Jonas. We like to give you more than one way to do the same thing. But up on your top toolbar, you'll find the report finder. And then alternatively, if you've got executive dashboard, I think we've got it in here as well. Nope, I'm lying to you. There is another place for it. I think it's here in reports. There we go, reports and report finder. So you've got two that are available to you. Pretty much all users should have the toolbar, so that's why I always just default to that one. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, oh, there we go. How do you create a new sales area? So Lindsay, the simple answer to that is you go into the point of sale system under system setup and under system parameters. And there is an option in here for sales areas. Now, I will say this with a bit of a disclaimer. It's really easy to set up a new sales area code and define what it is, but there are quite a few different setups that are involved in there. So there is some documentation on our support website. I would encourage you where if this is something that's relatively new to you, that you maybe reach out to our professional services team and schedule an hour to get that set up, because there are definitely some key considerations that would need to be made there that touch on a few different areas of your Jonas system. Phyllis, you asked about the rooms booked feature. This one's specific to our hotel module or to our rooms module. So chances are you don't see this just because you don't have our hotel module. Sophie, I'm a newbie. How do I color the sales items? Super easy. There's a great video, and if you just scroll back up in the comments here, you'll see a video link in YouTube with about 5 or 6 different videos in there that go through in detail with you how to set up menus and how to maintain them. Very, very easy. All you do is you pick the color that you'd like to use. If you don't like any of our set colors, there's also a wheel of colors that you can select from as well. But if I wanted to color some green, I just click on the buttons that I want to color in green. Let's say I wanted to do some in yellow as well. I pick the next color and off I go. Can you add tabs to your toolbar? Yes, you can. So another video that we have online, your display order menu tabs, if you would have noticed, this one's a bit more abstract. So you're going to want to watch our video on how to set those up, because there's a few different setups that you need to do. But I think what you're referring to is when Greg was in his point of sale system, there was a little toolbar of menus that appeared there. And those are those right there. So those can be pre-programmed, and we've got a great video on how to do this. Yeah, I see someone else mentioning YouTube a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of videos on there, and there's lots of ones on the menu topic as well.
And sorry, Jeremy, for that person asking about the toolbar, maybe if you want a for sure answer for that one, you can give us a little bit more detail, because I'm not sure if they were referring to the top toolbar in the main Jonas menus or.
Yes. Good point, Greg. We've got 3 different toolbars that you could be asking us about. Can records be accessed afterwards in Timekeeper? Yes, they can, absolutely. So again, back to the whole concept of archiving data, all of your data is still there. You haven't deleted anything. You've just filed it away. You've told Jonas that this is older data and that I still need to access it for reporting purposes. I just can't, let's say, modify a time punch or something like that. Hey, Dana. What would happen if a sales item is kept on the menu and a staff member tries to put an order through on it? So it will warn you. And I believe if you're deactivating items, Greg, it warns you, right? It tells you that you're deactivating an item that's on a menu. So it definitely is a prompt that will appear and a warning that will appear. So they should know. The other thing you can do is you can also make items temporarily unavailable. This is another common one that I get a lot of questions about. So if, for example, you come into your appetizers menu and I've got this melon here and I don't have it available tonight for whatever reason, you can also make an item temporarily unavailable. And I like this one because what it does is it actually puts that item, if you can see there, in brackets for me. So visually on the screen, the staff know right away that that item is not available tonight. So a couple of nice little features there.
And sorry, you get the same thing as well. If that item is being deactivated, it'll temporarily make that item unavailable as well. You get the same pop-up.
Perfect.
So even if you deactivate an item and you leave it on your menu by accident, nobody will be able to click on it.
All right, well, I'm sure many of you have another session that you're joining just here at the top of the hour. Greg and I thank you so much for your time. We are hosting one more session on system maintenance and cleanup, more to do with the back end, accounting, membership. So I'm sure we'll see quite a few of you on that session as well. And if not, consider it. It's in about an hour's time from now. We'll see you all soon. Take care.